Overtime was created by Matt Holman, founder of the EMW Foundation, and is made possible by the Prodigy Media Group and RPM Athlete Performance, with inspirational credit to my friend, Dr. Fred Opie. Welcome to Overtime, an open conversation series on racism in the sport of lacrosse. We hope you find this thought-provoking, educational, and it leaves you better prepared as a member of the lacrosse community. Thanks again for joining us, and now for this week's panel. Hello, this is episode 6 of Overtime, a candid conversation in racism. I'm your host, Matt Holman, and we want to welcome in our panelists tonight. And we'll start with Taina Gamory. She was born and raised in New York. Hi, Taina. She was first aware of lacrosse at age 10. She's currently a member of the University of Hartford team and an undecided major. When time permits, she volunteers for the Brooklyn lacrosse program and for her old varsity high school team at Warwick, New York. Next, we have Shay Urrea. Shay is a native San Diegan. He first learned of the game at age 15 while at San Diego High School. He went on to attend and play at Berkeley, an MCLA program where he obtained his degree in business administration and currently works in the San Francisco financial market. He's given back to the game by working with the Oakland Youth Lacrosse program. Next, we have Arielle Ramirez. Hi, another New Yorker. She was raised in Baldwin in Nassau County. Arielle was first exposed to lacrosse at the age of 10 and began playing at 11. She took her talents to the University of Hartford, where she currently plays, and is a communication major. She also coaches a few girls locally when time permits. Next, we have Malcolm Holman, and yes, he is my nephew. Malcolm was born and raised in Summit, New Jersey, and he remembers being exposed to the game at the age of 3, or whenever memories form. He played up to the point that he discovered he was more gifted in cross country and had more friends in that group. He attends Occidental College in Los Angeles and is an undecided major. He stays connected to the game by helping his uncle out with EMW Foundation and MCLA events. Elizabeth Scott, and she goes by Liz. Got her attention by saying Elizabeth, though. Liz was born in Bern, PA. Is that correct? Say it right? Got it. And just outside of Philadelphia, and she was exposed to the game early since all of her older brothers played. You can only imagine what those games look like. She currently attends Loyola University, where she is a psychology major and economics minor. During the summer, she works on the staff of the Julie Foudy Soccer and Lacrosse Leadership Academy. And last but not least, we have Emma Privitera, born in Rochester, New York. Hi, Emma. She was raised in Crofton, Maryland. Emma was first aware of lacrosse at the age of 9. She also attends the University of Hartford and majors in political science with law school to follow, excuse me. She has worked for Maryland United as a goalie coach and now prefers to work individually one-on-one with goalies. So welcome to our panelists of players. This is the student player round of the discussions, and I have a few questions and items to discuss, but we're going to start with your submitted questions that panelists kind of gave us here. And I think it's appropriate to start with this one. And it's more of a story that I'll lead into, but one of you submitted this, that you definitely had moments where you wanted to stop playing. This is growing up. A lot of times, not only did I feel like an outsider, but due to the lack of representation of people of color at the collegiate level and higher, I at times had very little hope that I would go far in the sport. That I imagine that could be the sentiment of any and all of you. Let's just talk about that and see where that goes. Who wants to start?
I'll start because I did submit that.
I wasn't going to tell anybody, but
it's okay. It's all right. So I, right, that's what I had said. Initially, like it was previously discussed, I started playing lacrosse around 11, And although that might sound kind of young, if anybody is aware, Long Island is like a lacrosse hub. So I was late to the party. So honestly and truthfully, I started playing lacrosse because everyone around me was playing, and I thought it might be a good way to meet people and, have something in common with these people who I felt like I didn't have much in common with. And, without saying, I feel like it was self-explanatory that I meant my white peers. I was at a new school, and I thought that might be a great way to connect with people. And truthfully, it felt like it made me more different, because now I wasn't just this new black girl. I was this new black girl who thought she could play lacrosse, and it was like, what are you doing? So I, stuck with it, because after I got past the wanting to fit in, I liked it. And, despite how much I liked it, it was just so hard sometimes. You go out to these tournaments, and I feel like everyone, at least in this conversation, has been to a tournament, and there are thousands of people at this tournament. So imagine not seeing one person that looks like you in these fields on fields of people. They just continue, they don't end, and there's no one that looks like you. And now we're seeing more and more, there'll be one or two. And that's great. It's just, for a developing young person, it's really hard to continue with something that you don't see a future in for such a long time.
Anybody else jump in, and don't forget to unmute yourselves before you speak.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say I experienced like similar sentiments. Like, it's tough because like part of becoming a POC lacrosse player is like getting comfortable really fast and being the only person in the room that looks like yourself. And you like slowly realize that, is whether it's team meetings, whether it's like club games. I remember for me it's like a big transition, because like in San Diego is like now becoming more of a West Coast lacrosse club like hub, but before then there wasn't much teams. And like I just started playing lacrosse because like my PE coach in my inner city high school was like kept nagging me to the point where I decided to try out. And thankfully I fell in love with the sport. But like I didn't realize until I got to like Cal Berkeley and I started to like hang out with people who've been playing, like who grew up with sticks in their hand, that like it's a completely different community than like the inner city kids I was playing with. I'm actually playing with people who I can't relate to in a sense of not only like skin color, but just like family backgrounds and so forth. And it's tough too, because like when you go on to like do like outreach and help grow the game and really do your best to be that kind of segue for the next lacrosse generation, like I don't know what I tell like the Oakland lacrosse youths when they come up and tell me like this game is not meant for this. How come there's no like professional black lacrosse youth that I can look up to, and like having to like talk this youth into saying like you need to be the representation. It's like it's a big task to tell like a young kid that, So I mean, I'm just super glad that we get to have these conversations now and start playing our part, especially in the recent events.
Don't be afraid to speak up. I know we just started.
Although I can't attest to that fact, but up until the point of when I was in 8th grade, I had not had anybody but white players on my team. And then at the point we finally had a person of color in 8th grade, and the way that she was treated was definitely different because people weren't used to seeing that race playing, especially in lacrosse. And it took a toll on her emotionally, definitely, which was, everybody could see it. Growing up in tournaments, not that they were outwardly talking about how there were people of color playing, but it was kind of, they were known for most to not be as good, or they were thought of as less than, which definitely caused a lot of issues. And right now at the University of Hartford is the most people that I've ever had that are from different ethnicities and stuff, which is amazing. But there definitely is a lack of representation, and also what people think of the people that are already playing is definitely skewed.
Arielle, you were going to say something before.
I know, but he looked like he was going to say something. So I'm going to, just because it's fresh in my brain, going to touch on Emma's point. I know that brings up a really good conversation about just the stereotyping and the microaggressions that come with stepping out on the field as a person of color in this sport. Like Emma said, like I remember very clearly people already thinking that I could not play before they had seen me do anything. And then there was the contrast that I was too aggressive or I was scared. I have had like parents describe me as scary. Like I'm 5'4". Like I don't know who I'm scaring, but you know, just like trigger words like that, like say to my parents, like watching me play a game, like, or you know, just over exaggerate my muscularity or things like that. So there's both sides to that conversation. It's already the not believing in or the over exaggeration of my skill or my ability. And I think that's one of the most, like, I won't say that on the field I've experienced like too much blatant racism. I mean, there's been times, but the most I feel like everyone can recall like microaggressions, like the little things, and those really take a toll on players. Sorry. And then the thing I was going to say before, like Shay mentioned, I thought that was a really great point about how do you tell a kid who has no one to look up to that they need to be the person that someone else can look up to? Like it's a really hard concept to even grasp for people like us. Like we're young adults, but at the same, like a child, like how do you tell them like you need to stick with this because you need to be the person you wish you had? And it's really, you know, I'm going to speak for myself. Black kids in this country just have enough to deal with. They cannot just be kids. So to put another thing on their shoulders like that is like, it's crazy to think about. But that was a really great point, I thought.
Yeah, and I think I should expand more, like, and say, and like, since this is an open environment, I think people are gonna listen to us. Like, the microaggressions definitely like transcend off onto the field too. Like, it's not like a safe haven place. Although, like, I wouldn't say I personally experienced like anything really, really blatant, but like just like the small microaggression of someone telling you like, "Yo, one, this isn't football," just because again, like you're playing a little bit more aggressive, but let alone like one of my defensive teammates go decapitate a player and everyone's like pretty hot, like riled up and excited for that same exact play. And I would say like, I mean, yeah, it just takes a toll on you because I knew what sport I was playing just as you did when I laced up my cleats, but why do I have to hear that this isn't football?
It's interesting that a parent would say to another parent that your child is scary aggressive. That just means that their child's a punk. I'm just going to say it. I mean, I've seen plenty of kids that get it and they're playing in 8th grade. I'll be reffing a tournament and the child clearly has more skill, more talent. And, you know, I don't know what they'll be in 10 years, but at that moment, they're grasping the concept stronger than another player who shies away. Yet it's the player that's grasping the concept's fault. It's neither player's fault. They're kids, for Christ's sakes. Those interesting things that have happened in this world. And that's why it's good to hear from you as players, because I think too much of this is spoken about. And I'm not saying you're not adults, you're all young adults, but too much of this is spoken about with people. And there are leadership issues that we have to address as leaders, but I think the players really can help dictate, knowing that you're saying when you're meeting young kids, you're doing volunteer work with these youth groups, and those young players are having a hard time looking up to somebody. That's like, you know, you don't want to have to say, well, go on the internet and find this person and you know, read about a Pat Young or a Kyle Harrison or a Miles Jones. You know, they actually have to do such hard work that it's like, it's kind of demotivating, I guess, is what you're saying to me. So interesting. Along that lines, what do we think the root causes are for lack of diversity in our sport today? And as you become ambassadors of the sport, which you all seem to be moving toward that direction, what are you actively doing to address these obstacles?
Oh, there's a lot, obviously, there's a lot of directions this conversation can go, but I'm going to start on the topic of socioeconomics and just the way that this sport is marketed to people. It is not marketed towards people that look like me. It is something that I had to seek out. Living in Long Island, I did not know about lacrosse until I was 10 years old. Like, I don't even think I heard about it. So that's number one. It's like when you get into communities and then we start talking about resources or the lack thereof and the financial commitment that this sport takes, you know, I'm only speaking from my own experience. Living here, you'll learn fast. If you want to grow in this sport, the route is club teams and travel teams and private lessons, and all of those things just cost a ridiculous amount of money. Travel costs for any club team, I don't think I have to tell anyone here how much that is. Then there's equipment, and then there's the hotel fees after you get there, and then there's the meals, and then, you know, team and the gear and this, that, and the third. So it doesn't even seem like attainable at all for, you know, people living in predominantly, you know, Black communities or just not predominantly white communities per se. So I think that's really probably the biggest thing, aside from the lack of representation, because there probably would be more representation if that was addressed on the one hand. And then as a player or just as a person, ways that I actively am trying to promote diversity is, you know, again, like I'm just going to refer back to what Shay said. I hope to be the person that I wish I saw when I was coming up in this game. So you have to talk about things and you have to make yourself heard. And it's not always easy, but that's really a big way. People aren't going to hear you until you let them know you have something to say. So just, you know, being active in conversations and not being afraid to step into spaces that might even be uncomfortable, and let people ask you questions. It's just really important. Like the smallest things do the most. And then like we discussed, giving back to your community in ways that you can. That's really it.
Yeah, one of the things I kind of realized, like growing up in like football, like playing like multiple sports in high school, is like the relationship between like my football coaches and players is like far more differently between like my lacrosse coach and players, in the sense that like a lot of football players tend to be other people of color, and they kind of understand like what it takes to like actually get a kid to be ready on the field. He knows that he has like a lot of issues back at home, so like a lot of times like these coaches take on a more of a role model figure, and they're the ones who actually drive the kid to practice. They're the one that make sure the kid actually has like gear. Whereas like in lacrosse, like it's much different because you deal with much different like families, in the sense that like I think like the typical family in lacrosse already kind of has like those avenues kind of sorted out. So I think like one of the things I like realized, and like what I kind of like told to like my Oakland lacrosse peers, is like, don't be afraid to like transcend from just being a coach to some of these kids. A lot of these kids need the mentor first and then the lacrosse coach after, because in football, like that's exactly what that person is to them. But like I think like a lot of lacrosse coaches don't realize that initially, but as soon as you start to work with these people, you soon find out like what it's taking. I just think I'm kind of like going on tangents here, but that's like in the sense that like I think that the relationship is very, very different across sports, and I think lacrosse, it needs to be like merged a little bit better.
Let me say this, and I know the answer, but I'm going to throw it out there. That say Oakland Lacrosse, let's use that example. I'm a little bit aware of their program. I like it. It's good that you're doing that, Shay. Would it help to have white players also work at these groups as well? Now they're not able to sit there and say, oh, I grew up this way or that way as the kid did, but I think it goes both ways. This whole discussion goes both ways. And as a lacrosse community, we need to pick a player of color. I think our only job, main job really, is to allow a person that's white to learn and ask questions. Like you just said, you know, ask me questions and ask them sincerely. Join a panel discussion, do something, make an effort. And we need to be ready to receive that information and process it in a way that, you know, turns it around. And I look at it like, I've had white coaches that have inspired me. You know, it shouldn't be no different in lacrosse. We shouldn't, you know, and maybe we're all, as a panel, speaking to all the coaches out there, like, don't be afraid. Or even, you know, seniors in high school, seniors in college that are helping out, you know, different levels. Don't be afraid to go and volunteer at the team that really needs the help. You know, that's what I always say. I'm like, why the hell are you going back to the school that's got, you know, and Shay, you know, some of our schools in San Diego here, you don't need to go to TP to help.
Yeah.
10 other schools that would love an experienced lacrosse person, you know, to help them. So I throw that out there as a topic.
And I don't mean to like hog the floor a little bit, but just to kind of like add on to that. And then that is the case, and especially like I experienced like our Berkeley team, like Coach Webb does highly encourage like the other, especially your first year, they encourage all the like his entire team to like take a week out of their time to go spend with the Oakland Lacrosse youth. We have a great relationship with the head of Oakland Lacrosse, Coach Kelly. Shout out to him for just making sure that college keeps going, because it's a wonderful program. But I would say, like, when you are a non-person of color and you're given that opportunity, do value it. Like, because I did experience like a bunch of my teammates just kind of go because coach told me to go, you know, and they're not going there to actually learn and be an ambassador just because it's, I mean, not to say that they didn't have fun and enjoy the experience, but like, I do challenge like every person who's given that opportunity in the future, try to like dive a little bit deeper and like hear these kids' stories and hear and like really, like you said, be maybe that white coach that could inspire that kid to be a great lacrosse player.
Mentorship can come from everywhere. I didn't know I mentored a young white player in high school just by chance because I knew her mom, and her father had passed when she was only 2 or 3 or something. So we connected through lacrosse initially, and her and her mom were having the typical 15-year-old and mother women arguments that you young ladies have. And I, you know, was just like, hey, let's go out and throw the ball around. And then I would go to her games every once in a while and give her a ride home from a game. And, you know, I thought I helped her. And she said I did. So that, you know, I think it can come from anywhere. So we shouldn't be, to your point, Shay, you know, embrace whatever opportunity that gets presented to you.
I'm going to touch on that a bit real quick. So I'm from Philadelphia, and I grew up in a privileged white home, and my story is kind of similar, like kind of what Shay made me think of this. Like, I'm kind of using my privilege and my status to help this topic, this social justice, especially in women's lacrosse. I can think of only one Black athlete that I looked up to in the women's lacrosse, and it was Taylor Thornton. And I'm thinking, like, well, I was always thinking, like, why aren't there more? What's the deal here? Why is it lacrosse? All this stuff. And then, because I grew up in a town where I never like knew racism because I was around Black and white kids all the time. It was never a thing. My parents never made it a thing. A person was a person, like Dr. Seuss, no matter how small. Like, your person's a person, no matter how small. Whatever it was, like, that was a person. So when I got to college, it was really different. I was around kind of like what Arielle was saying. I was around Long Island people. I was around a lot of Connecticut people. I was around a lot of different types of backgrounds where race was an issue for people. And it was awful for me. Like, I've had, it's like some of my years, I'm like, I get in political fights with my teammates, my best friends in the locker room about it. Like, because I never had that problem. I always just, I don't know. It just never dawned on me. And I think that's my parents doing a great job of raising a kid like that. But now, like Shay was saying, it's got to be, and like you come in with mentorship. When I'm an ambassador in lacrosse world, when I teach Black kids, when I teach white kids, what you say really matters, and words sting and words hurt. So like, you treat everybody the same, you do everything the same, and you encourage the people who need more encouragement, that type of thing. But I think from the basis, it's like from the core, people on teams, especially like Loyola, they say things like microaggressions all the time, and it doesn't go, it goes unnoticed, it goes unflagged, it goes like anything. And like you guys were saying, it's a paper cut. It's like a cut, and it can hurt and it can sting as it adds up. So I'm thinking, like, for me, when I'm going to be a mentor and I'm going to be a ambassador one day and I'm going to be a coach one day, just knowing what I say has value and has weight, and just like treating everyone and seeing their background. So I just wanted to say that because I think it's really important, as just like knowing that like there are people like me out there being white that are, all we do is fight. And I just wanted to let you know because it was kind of on the subject. So, yes.
Coming off of what Liz said, I might misquote you because I think you kind of turned it around in the end, but I'm just gonna say it as a flat out thing, like universally not directed at you. And I am glad that you said it. I think you kind of mentioned that what you, or maybe your team practices, is you treat everybody the same. You encourage people who need to be encouraged, and everyone, we're all lacrosse players here, and that's very important. I think a very common mistake that white people essentially make in trying to, enforce equality, and I think that's why it gets so confusing, because you hear equal, and equal means the same. But what it doesn't mean is to be colorblind, and what it, like, essentially what's very, and that's what you said at the end, was you are acknowledging people's backgrounds, and that's really the key to it. So I'm going to be honest, you can't treat everybody the same, because something that you could say to my white teammate, you may not be able to say to me. And, some things are not going to translate the same. And that's just important for anyone of any background that is different from yours. Like, it is important to acknowledge people's backgrounds. Like, I know people all the time who are just like, a person is a person. We all are the same, blah, blah. But, we're not. And it's important to acknowledge that, because it's not a bad thing to be different. And that's where it gets confusing, and people think that that is the answer. We are all the same, so I'm going to treat us all the same. It's a flat line, but it's not. And not that it's even so much complicated. It's just, if you're not understanding, that's why we have conversations like this, so you can understand how to be effective in your approach. So that is just to anybody, any non-person of color trying to affect positive change, because I know that people's intentions are good, and I know what people are trying to do. And I think a lot of times it doesn't click that, sometimes people think that they're being offensive if they are treating you differently, but racial sensitivity is important in this movement that we're trying to make, in this forward movement that we're trying to make.
I would just add that I tend to, I think both between Arielle and Liz, I treat everyone the same, and that's a good statement. But I think you followed up with, however, I recognize that people are different, and I do, because there's general characteristics that I treat everyone the same. If you lie to me, I don't have anything to do with you. That comes with age and wisdom. I know you're all young, and people lie to you, and you're like, oh, give them a second chance, third chance. Me, I'm like, nope, time, peace out, I gotta go. Got no time for that. So that's me treating everyone the same. But I also could meet someone, and I generally ask them, I say, first I ask them their name, and I can tell by certain names, and I've learned this over the years. And I say, now, what nationality is that? And I ask them, genuinely want to know. And then if I know something about that nationality, I might ask them, is this true? This is what I know, and whatever, and have a conversation. And I find it respectful to them, and I learned it, and I think it's something that I think one of our future guests will mention, but he was big on travel, and he's a white player, and he's traveled out of the country and been to countries where he's beyond the minority. He's like, he's the guy they're looking at like this, because he's white and they've never seen a white person. But he realized some things, and I realize this when I travel to different countries. If you just genuinely try, you will get a positive response. So I agree with what Liz and Arielle are saying, and I think the meaning there is that I do treat everyone the same. However, you recognize differences, and I think that would be kind of a statement that anybody can use watching this is like, yeah, I do treat people the same, and there's differences, and then you're going to have that list. Like I said, me, the number one thing is lying to me. I don't see the need for it. And there's other things, but you'll have your own personal get the fuck out of here list, basically, is what I call it, So that's my 2 cents to add on to that. And feel free to anybody, I know some of you, this is new to you, so that's fine. That's why we're doing it. And it's okay to listen until you hear something that you want to comment on. So don't feel like you just have to speak.
Can I say something, Matt?
Yes, you may.
I wanted to go back to Shay's point about like a mentor in the sport. So like from a young age, my dad is black, and there were like lacrosse sticks around the house because he played in high school. So sort of from experience, I just sort of like from a young age, I saw a black person to my senior who played lacrosse in high school and enjoyed it and continues to like have a stick around and play catch with me. So I knew that like, well, if he could do it, then I can probably do it. And I also like had heard how great Matt was in high school. So I was like, well, if Matt could go on and play in college and he could coach, like, and he could do this for a living, then like, so I had 2 like really prominent figures in my life to sort of, to show me what a future in lacrosse could be, like, regardless of my skin color. So that sort of helped me anytime I had doubts while playing and growing up and just being like, wow, I'm the only black person on the field right now. I'm the only black person on, the 10 fields I can see at this lacrosse tournament. But it didn't matter too much to me because I was like, this sucks, but I'm younger. I'm a little more naive to the true scope of things. But, in 5th grade, I saw it and I was like, well, my uncle can do it. I guess I can do it, or I know a guy that can do it. I've seen someone else do this. So I would suck it up and just keep playing and for the love of the sport. So it was just it was nice to have figures in my life that I could relate to and see a future in lacrosse. I don't know. I think mentorship is definitely an important factor in having a younger generation of people of color playing the sport. Yeah.
Bravo. I agree. So let's bring this is a good one. Do you believe it's a coach's job to educate young players on the issues faced in the lacrosse community? And the issues being obviously equity, inclusion, racism. How do you feel about you as players? Do you think a coach should be, well, I guess in this day and age, I think a coach should be, but what are your thoughts on that as far as a coach, or coach's role in this equation?
Are we talking about like coaches to people how old?
Any age, but stick to high school and college since that's really predominantly where you're all fresh.
Okay. I think if we are thinking of coaches in the scope that we totally are as, mentors, absolutely, it is part of their responsibility to keep these conversations alive and be at least promoting them. Also, I think that's just a really good way to segue into the conversation about how much of a difference a coach can make in the experience of any player. But for players of color in particular, I haven't had many coaches of color. I think I had one at Brooklyn Lacrosse when I was there for a little while. But, like, I forget who said it, but it doesn't really matter the race of your coach. Like a coach can make such a difference in not only your game, but your experience. And for example, growing up, I did not really have very many coaches who I felt like were on my, like, who I felt like would fight for me if they needed to. You know, thankfully, in college now, I've never had someone who I felt like was more on my side than my coach. And that just shows like the things that'll do for you on the field and off is crazy. Like when I was a freshman, I was just not open at all. And Emma was there, she knows. Like I just was not, I wasn't there to, I was there to play lacrosse because growing up, that's what I did on lacrosse teams. I was not there to make friends because I didn't have any. And that's what it was for me. It was business. And my coach was like, we need you to be more than that here. We need you to be part of this community, and this community is ready to welcome you. So it is absolutely a coach's responsibility. Especially in college, you know, like you don't have your parents there. That's really like you're kind of the highest it goes as far as like somebody being there for you. And in college, you know, it's difficult. And I'm totally going off topic here, but I know it can be difficult for some coaches. I feel like they don't know how to enter into these conversations. And my coaches boiled it down to simply like, we all sit down and she's like, this is what we're going to talk about because it's an issue. It's going on in the world and we all live in this world, and the world doesn't just look like this, or the world doesn't just look like this room. So yeah, it's really important, especially because we're more than lacrosse players. You're going to graduate one day, and whether you play professional lacrosse or not, you're going to be in a much bigger picture world than you are in this little bubble. So
True enough. Anybody else?
I agree with Arielle. I think it definitely starts with coaches, but also parents as well. I think everything happens inside the home, and coming from a psychology major, like a lot of the things that you learn at a young age, and it sticks with you the rest of your life. So I think coaches need to just enforce it more. I don't think they enforce it enough, and I think they will start to as we continue on with this path that we're taking with social change and social justice. So I think that, like, especially at Loyola, I think my coach could do a lot better reinforcing it. Like, I know she's there and doing it, but just knowing and having everyone on board, and like, just like you're buying into a motion offense, you're buying into a defense, you got to buy into change and like cultural change within the system and within the lacrosse program. And so I think every coach in the United States could do a better job of that overall, and every parent could do a better job of that, and every teammate could do a better job of that as well. So
Going off of, oh, sorry, you can go.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
No,
But yeah,
you
just kind of like echoing Liz, I do think like the responsibility is bared on everybody. It's not just primarily the coach. Like it's at the end of the day, this boils down to a human rights issue. So this responsibility bears down to your teammates, it bears down to your parents, and like even like you're the Black families at home, like don't ostracize your kid for playing lacrosse because you're not familiar with the sport, you know, and like all your Black friends, don't ostracize your friend because he's not playing basketball with you, or whatever your spring sport is, because there's something that we find a love in, and it's actually like I take offense when some of my friends say that, but I would say that like coaches are the creator of whatever their team environment is, and I would say like keep it organic, and it must be done, and it must be done organically. There's no reason for you to like take 20 minutes out of the X and O's to have like some diversity and inclusion talk with your team. It's going to be really like counterintuitive, and it's going to really make your if you do have a person of color on your team, it's going to make them feel very awkward. But it's more so just like, do encourage your team and your players to be good people. One of the things I always admired about Coach Webster is whenever we ended lacrosse practice, he'd always tell us to like go outside and do a good deed and go be good people. I think that's where it falls in, is just making sure you do know that as a coach, you are harboring an environment and harboring people that are going to go on to be professionals outside of lacrosse. So do make sure you're doing your part to make sure these people are good people.
Emma?
Going off of that, I think it is important for coaches to note that they do have a position of power when they're coaching a young group of boys or girls, and most of the people sometimes will look up to them and they will imitate their actions and whatnot. So I do think it's 100% important for them to not only set a good example, but create an open environment where this is something that the entire team will do. It's not enough for the coach to simply do it. They also need to instill the environment and have the team also buy into these sorts of things.
And one of you mentioned if the coach doesn't have your back, doesn't defend you, and we've had a number of panelists that have mentioned this, and I love Trevor Tierney's story when he's coaching in his I think it's a summer club league, and his story was that he didn't feel like he defended his player enough, and he regretted it, which was interesting perspective. And yet he had another opportunity where he did defend his player, and he immediately thought, oh, Jesus, they think I'm another Tierney yelling at the referees, which I thought was really funny because his dad is Bill Tierney, obviously, who's known for letting referees know when he's disagreeing with them. But his point was that he thought it was extremely, extremely important that he do a better job of defending his players and stepping up for his players. And I think your Hartford coach shared a great story last week about she subtly spoke up to an official about the way the official was calling the game toward one of her players of color, and the official took offense to it and all this, and she got calls from all these people saying, how dare you say this and that. And now in the last few weeks, the same people have called her back and said, we'd like to learn more about your view. And, I guess their way is probably their subtle way of saying, yeah, we screwed that up. We didn't handle that right. And she didn't say anything I thought was offensive. She said, perhaps you're and one of you, if one of you remember the story, to speak up, but she said, perhaps you're calling the game a little biased or something like that. And go ahead, Arielle. I know you remember.
She said, not to make any, improper accusations, but I feel like you may be calling the game based on some implicit bias. Essentially meaning like not conscious of,
right.
Giving her benefit of the doubt.
Right. That's when you learn, and I encourage everyone, and if you already haven't, take the U.S. Lacrosse. I say that I think it's diversity and inclusion online web course. It takes like 90 minutes. It's free. It really does examine and define implicit and explicit biases and some other topics that are kind of, I guess, hot right now or very popular. And I think it's valuable. It's something I know the MCLA is moving toward instituting, at least I know in my conference, we're going to institute every player, take it and moving forward because I think it's valuable. So I'll pose another question or topic that you guys sent in, you ladies and gentlemen. Well, this is more for the ladies, but I guess it could work for the men too. Being culturally appropriate when it comes to hair. Yeah. Arielle says it all. I mean, that's something, and I jest, but I've heard about this for years, that it's, Taina's she's ready to jump all over this, so I'm gonna let her speak, so go ahead.
Hi, okay, so this is a big one for me. This is probably the one I've experienced the most, being in the sport over the years. So I wouldn't wear, protective styles that people of color wear often, like braids, box braids, cornrows, and that's because that's what works for our hair. Those are the styles that through generations of generations. However, I would get criticized for not only the texture of my hair, but the way I would style it. So at one point, I would just straighten my hair all the time. And hair discrimination goes beyond, of course, the walls of lacrosse. It prevents people from their jobs. Kids have been kicked out of schools, this, that. But mostly what I've seen is I've gotten criticized, and I wouldn't be comfortable in my own skin with hairstyles that I wanted to wear. And yet what I've seen a lot is for big games, like our section finals games, or the states game, all of a sudden the girls are like, oh, like, let's cornrow our head. Like, they would cornrow their entire heads, and it was out of like, oh, like a crazy cool hairstyle to do like in celebration of this game or this big event. And meanwhile, it's just a total paradox, because the whole time I'm being criticized for it, and these hairstyles such as cornrows, I would hear these girls call those styles ghetto, and put some harsh labels and stereotypes on them. And then I see them wearing them, and just like as dress up, it was just really insulting and degrading. And I remember I didn't speak up, and I barely even knew what cultural appropriation was at the time. This is about like 2 years ago. And I wish I did, but at the same time, I just kind of felt uncomfortable, and I didn't feel like I had a voice, because there was nobody I felt that I can talk to about it, because all my teammates I didn't have anyone else of color on my team. So we walked, where we had our section finals game was in a predominantly Black and Latino neighborhood. And a lot of the students that were on campus walking around were looking at the girls who had cornrows and shaking their head and saying things. And the girls were like, why do they even care? Like, why I'm wearing my hair like this, blah, blah. And they were all complaining that they were getting looks. And I had a notion of like, I agreed with them. Like, obviously I knew this wasn't right, but I couldn't like pin it down on why. But yeah, that's just been something that has occurred over and over again for me. I just see like a lot of cultural appropriation with hair in lacrosse, and people celebrate with hairstyles that they've criticized or called ghetto and unkept. So I think that's something to address. And I think that's something a coach can definitely step in on. Cultural appropriation is real, and racism is real. And now that everything right now is on blast, this is the time to have a Zoom call with your team and to get it together, so that a coach can address these things and have a conversation. Even if there aren't people of color on their team, it's just really important. And there's no ignoring what's happening right now. It's absolutely everywhere. So yeah, that's my take on that.
So, like Taina just said, in her, recalling of past events, she is like, that is a prime example. Someone who was not even aware of what cultural appropriation was, still felt what was wrong with what was going on around her. Like she said, hair discrimination goes so far beyond this sport, any sport. Just hair in itself, while it may for other people not seem like a big deal, I'm not going to speak for Black men because I'm not a Black man. Black women, it is so important, and it is such a large part of your development. I don't think I've come across, well, I won't even say that, but I could name few Black girls that I know personally who don't have the phase story, the scared to wear your natural hair, or felt like, and that all kind of depends on how you grew up, who you grew up around, where you grew up, because a lot of that is about influence and what's around you. So if that wasn't encouraged in your house, and sometimes it's really not, that's a whole larger conversation about shaming Black people for their natural features, and it's amongst the community, but we're not gonna talk about that. So it goes far deeper than how you wear your hair for a game. And I think that also ties into the conversation about racial sensitivity. If every time I show up with a new hairstyle, everyone's, oh my God, Arielle, oh my gosh, it's so, can I touch it? Oh, it got so long. It's really, it's frustrating. And, you kind of just have to, you learn after a while, you kind of just got to be tolerant and just thank you, because I know it doesn't come from any malintent, but that is something that could be taught, that it is a sensitive thing. Hair is a sensitive thing for Black women. It is a sensitive thing, and it is something so sacred to your culture. It's not style. Taina just discussed cornrows. Like, I think I literally had cornrows in my hair from age like 4 to 8. Like, just, it's what was easy for my mom to do. It kept my hair done for a week. It, like, you know, and there's so many misconceptions, and like she talked about, so many loaded words. I hate the word ghetto because no one ever just uses it to describe white people. It is a racist word. Like, it's so loaded, but that is how people describe Black hairstyles when they're on Black people, not really when they're on other people. So that's something, like she said, goes far behind the conversation of lacrosse, but we see it, like she said, when for games, everyone on game day in the locker room just sitting around braiding each other's hair. And we're not saying don't wear braids. Like, it's and I think that's what people don't seem to understand, that it's more than that for us. So watching that happen is kind of just, you're just perpetuating something that it's not fair, you know? Something that I got criticized for so long. It's cute, you know? Something that prevents people from working. Like, just, it's so complicated. But, you know, and I say complicated because it's like, how am I going to tell you not to braid your hair for game day? Like, it's just, the sensitivity part is what needs to be understood. Yeah, I'll stop there.
You're all touching on awareness. It's just being aware.
Yes.
You know, I'm bald by choice, by the way. I have hair, but like, I've had people want to touch my head. I'm like, get the fuck out! You're not touching my head. I don't know where your hands are doing. Oh, it's always like, oh, it's a joke. I'm like, that's not a joke. This is my body. I don't. It's like me going, oh, let me just grab your ass or something. You know, it's not what we do. I know I got you guys cracking up, but I'm just saying.
And I don't mean to.
Uh-oh. Arielle froze. Uh-oh. She froze. See if we can get her back here. Did she freeze for everybody else? Yeah. All right, let me message
Yeah,
you.
her screen went black for me.
Right.
Oh, mine?
Oh, she's back.
You're back. You froze for a minute there. It was
Sorry.
right when you were going to say something about my comments, so go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know if we heard anything, so I'll just start from the beginning. So yeah, I don't want to be reaching, but it's just a conversation that I've had, and I do think the points are relevant. So I often wonder, and I've talked about it with my mom and my peers, I often wonder, like, what goes through someone's head when they approach you and then ask you if they can touch your hair, because you had to really think about that. You had to walk up to me and you had time to think about it, and you thought about it and you were like, this is what I'm going to say, and you said it. So often it, like, for a long time, I was just like, you know, I didn't understand white people's fascination with my hair. You know, it's hair. It's, you know, and then I asked another white person, and I said another white person, like I'm a white person. I asked a white person, like one of my peers, and they were like, well, you know, it's unique. It's something that I don't have. So I want to see what it's like. But I mean, that's the point. Like, it's mine. And also, this was the part that I was kind of, you know, it's not a reach, but you have to think about it. Historically, it just goes back to like the systemic racism that is just rooted into this culture that we live in, and the right that white people feel like they have to Black bodies, It's a far greater conversation that I'm not even going to dive into because we'll be here all night. But it's something to definitely think about. Historically, the right that white people feel like they have to Black bodies, and that is what gives that is white privilege. That is what gives makes someone feel like they can come up to me and ask me if they can touch my hair. Strangers. I have had people not ask, and just it come like after a while it just sometimes you don't even know how to handle it. I've had it happen to me in workspaces and I can't even defend myself. Like I have no power in these spaces. And I think that's part of what makes people think that it's okay. Because like, what can I do? So that's a big part about being aware, and I'm gonna let Taina talk.
Sorry. While we're on the topic of hair, there's another thing that I can recall that would often happen. Also, my team is not only predominantly white. I live in a white affluent town. So right off the bat, I don't even have any friends of color here because the options are just so limited. But moving on, I would also, people love to braid their hair for game days, and that's totally fine. But something that I would experience is they'd be like, oh, like go to Taina, and they'd make jokes and be like, oh, like she knows how to braid because the Black girl always knows how to braid. And that was just also very, for one, from the start they already called out like I would never forget that I was the only Black girl on the team, and it's not that it's a bad thing that I'm only Black girl on the team, but when it's in a way that makes me feel left out and not included, that's when it's a problem. It's not bad to acknowledge my differences, but to make it seem like that I shouldn't belong is. But yeah, that was something that was really hard, and I don't know how to respond because at the time, at least, because, it's like braiding is a skill. I taught myself like in 5th grade, it's a skill, and it, if you can braid, like that's awesome for anyone. So on one hand, I'm like, should I take that as a compliment? On the other hand, I'm like, why are they stereotyping me? Like, I don't really like that. I wasn't really comfortable with that. And another thing about the topic of hair is I first wore box braids last spring, my senior year. Took up the school. It was really a topic of discussion. I would get a lot of things such as microaggressions, exotic. And at the time, I didn't even realize that was a microaggression. There weren't many people that I can have that conversation with that could relate to me. Exotic, in class, people just flipping them and playing with them, and it was just, they don't understand how objectifying it is, and it makes me feel less of a person. I can understand the fascination, but at the same time, there's just the lack of cultural awareness and understanding where these hairstyles come from, why we wear these hairstyles, and maybe just a basis of respecting other people's boundaries is definitely a huge problem. But it is definitely hard to deal with, and I don't know how to respond because, just like Arielle said, when people are touching your hair, it's like, thanks, like I like that you like my hair, but on the other hand, it's disrespectful and it's ignorant, and it's hard for someone to just say off right off the bat, like, I can't just be angry right off the bat because I feel like someone's gonna take it the wrong way. Then they'll get mad at me, and I feel like it just singles me out more because, like, I remember I did walk into work, and so I think somebody mentioned a work setting. I did walk into work, and one of my coworkers was like, oh, it was like this, it was just wet, and it was down, and they were like, oh, your hair, I never wear my hair. They're like, your hair looks so good, and they walked up to me and started flipping it like this. I was like, please please don't do that. So it's just hard to know what to do in those types of situations, and I don't want to come off as aggressive and be that, aggressive Black girl, or or I don't want to fit like the stereotypes that could, domino effect off of those things. But yeah, that's definitely a challenge, and hair discrimination was one of the biggest issues that I've had growing up in this town and being on the lacrosse team especially. So I'm going to flip it to Arielle.
She said it before I could, because I was just going to piggyback off her point. Like, just listening to that, I hope everyone just can try to understand. Like, I know nobody, well, I won't say nobody because I don't know everyone's experience. But judging by the audience, I'm gonna assume that no one has ever had that level of moral conflict. Like, imagine you don't even feel like you can defend yourself, because then you will be the angry Black woman, or like the moral conflict that goes on in your head when you are invaded like that. That's something that so many people don't even have to worry about. And then we're back on the topic of white privilege. That is something that someone like one of my teammates would not have to worry about. First of all, I don't know who's coming up to you and ask you to touch your hair. I personally wouldn't, but maybe another person would. And if you were to be like, no, that would be you defending yourself. But if I were to be like, no, it would be like, oh, she's rude, or why? What's wrong with you? What's the problem? It's because I like it. I don't know what type of admiration is you need to touch it, admire from afar, if that's what you wanted.
I mean, even going off of that, I mean, my hair's brushed out now, but I have naturally curly hair. And even me, I'm a white person, and people would still come up to me and try to touch my curly hair, because growing up, most of the people had the thin, straight hair. And I can't even imagine the cultural background and how hard that is. But personally, for me, people would always come up to it. And just like Arielle had pointed out, if I told them don't touch it, it was no issue. But I would have a person of color on my team, and if she was wearing her hair naturally curly, she never said anything because she felt like she couldn't. And I feel like that's a huge issue. And it's definitely, people gravitate towards the unknown, and they do it in an appropriate manner sometimes, which I think definitely needs to be addressed. But it's also kind of a double standard, as like, white people can tell somebody not to do it, but the minute that a person of color does it, it's an issue, or it's taken a different manner.
I'm going to cut in real quick. I just have to go because I have to get to dinner. But I just wanted to say one thing. I completely agree with the curly hair situation. I get it. I see it too. Not in the same manner as Arielle and Taina, you guys, but still the same thing. But I just wanted to say one more thing. Like, MLK used to say that there comes a time when silence is betrayal. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Like, we all need to speak up more, everyone. And especially whether it's who you vote for, whether it's what you say, whether it's who you stand by, whether it's what committee you're in, whether it's who you interact with on a daily basis. I just think we all need to speak up more during this time. Even us, like, all of us are speaking up and we're standing out and we're doing these things on a Sunday night and we're trying to make a difference, but also, like, we need to teach people also who to make a difference. We need to help people make a difference and guide them and lean them into that right direction. So it was lovely meeting all of you, and I'm really happy I got to understand you guys better and just be acknowledging and understanding of everything you all were saying, especially you ladies, and being in the lacrosse world. We all get it. So Matt, thank you again, and best of luck to all of you guys.
Yeah, thanks, Liz, for joining us. I know it was last minute for you in a schedule conflict, but thank you for joining us and representing Loyola so well. And I know Coach Dana will be happy that you did join us. So yeah, I know you got to sign off, and we'll keep going for a few more minutes.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Yeah. It's the hair thing. I think with anything in life, and I'll say this to you, Taina, especially, anything in life that you're uncomfortable with, you speak up and you do what's number one comfortable for yourself, and let the chips fall where they may. It's not your responsibility to worry about someone else's feelings. The only job you have is your own feelings and your own beliefs, and everything else, it's on the other person. So that's all I would ever say to you. You just speak up. If somebody has another opinion, you can try to coach ignorance out of somebody, but it's a losing proposition. So that's the old wise man talking to you right there. So let's end on this thought. What measures, if any, should be implemented in lacrosse regarding inclusion and equity? I know we kind of touched on inclusion and equity, but what just, if you have something that you think would work or something that coaches can try out there, anybody viewing maybe could try, give it a shout out or say one last thought on the subject of the entire conversation. Arielle, you're going last this time.
I was gonna say I'll go first and be quick because I talked the whole time.
It's all right. Listen, everybody has to understand. She's done. I actually got to see her speak. Was that last November, in Las Vegas, and she didn't know. See, I make her cry. But I thought she was fantastic. The entire panel was fantastic. The MC, the host of the panel, is a friend of mine, and we ran into each other at the breakfast, and he said, "Oh, you got to come to this thing," and I did, and I really enjoyed it. So when Arielle's name came up, I'm like, I know her name from somewhere, and then her coach told me, "Oh yeah, she spoke at this." So that's why, all you viewers, that she's just more comfortable doing this. So don't think that all these other panelists don't have anything to say. She's just, you've done this. This is like your third or fourth time you've done this, so it's not. So I know how it is. So you're still going last. Emma, what are your thoughts?
I think my main thing is also just raising awareness. I think overall there just needs to be more awareness by everybody. And some of the times it starts from the top down. Some people need those examples and those role models in order to think that they can do it as well. So I think in that it falls on athletic departments, coaches, and just setting a good example as that and trickling it down. And for white people to understand that there is an issue. I think sometimes the bystander effect happens kind of like, oh, that's not on me. I'm going to wait for somebody else to talk about it or wait for somebody else to address it. And you can't have that mindset going in, which I think is just completely detrimental. I just think there needs to be more open conversations. I think people need to be more understanding to listen to somebody, and if they're wrong, call them out on it and be able to accept that and not get defensive about it. And I think through those tough conversations and just more open environments, there will hopefully increasingly be more change in the game and just in general.
I like it. Malcolm?
Hey, I was muted. I'm sorry. I think definitely just obviously the conversation thing, just the more you talk about it, the more awareness there is, the easier it is to prevent just sort of at the source if there's just a mass awareness for just inequality issues and racial issues. And then as far as just microaggressions go, if a microaggression were ever directed towards me, on the field or off the field or just playing or being around people, there are times when I would just be it's not really worth it for me to combat this. I'll just suck it up and just walk away. But if there were when those things happened, if a friend of the person who said what they said were to be hey man, don't do that, that almost can be more effective than me standing up for myself. If they're their own friend is telling them from a knowledgeable standpoint, having been educated in the subject and knowing what to do, and just give them a little bump on the shoulder, come on, don't cut that out. And that sort of just, starts that just sort of starts the domino effect of people no longer having having microaggressions in their lives. So I don't know. That's what I was sort of thinking of when this is going on.
Yeah, teammates I think are vital, and it starts with the coach can educate, teammates can have your back, and can spawn from there. Shay, your thoughts?
For me, I think you can go on and on about all the things you can do, because it's just we can go into coach recruiting, we can go into just teammates' households, your own household. So I don't know, I think that's a thing that with these kind of conversations will definitely get better with time, especially as we keep pushing for these conversations and everyone starts speaking out for themselves a little bit more. So I guess for me, the biggest thing that I can kind of tell people and what I ask people to take away from this, I think that anyone can do short term is look in your garage, and I know you have a bunch of stuff from club ball 3 years ago, go donate it. There's going to be some Black youth out there that would love to have it. And that can be your big thing. That can be something tangible of you showing that you really want to grow the game. So I challenge everyone to that. Like, I know I have like old lacrosse stuff that I probably need to go donate as well. And I just really encourage everyone to, like, in the near term, give back. In the long term, keep having these conversations and be self-aware, not only for yourself, but of your teammates.
All right. And sorry, I skipped over Taina. I know you got to go back to work. Are you there still? Yep.
Yeah, sorry, I accidentally clicked the stop video. So I think something that's definitely important, and especially since I live in a white affluent town, we are also surrounded by other towns that are complete opposite. 30 minutes away, there's Middletown, and then 40 minutes away, there's Newburgh. These are both predominantly Black and Latino towns. Definitely a lot more people of color than here. So to attack the root of the problem, something that we can do is to reach out to these other programs that are different from us. I know we've had, I think they called it like play date practices or something like that. We had, they're pretty similar to us. We're other than like economic disparities, it's mostly white people in that town as well. So that's something that a coach can set up, have a play date. We can have a play date practice with a team who has predominantly Black players. And in these towns as well, and I mean, we can get into a whole nother conversation about redlining and the urban housing projects and that systemic racism and why there's so many poor communities that are filled with people of color. But a lot of their things are government funded. It's hard for them to get equipment. And I know my coach has mentioned that once or twice. He has reached out to them and tried to help. But you know, they also don't get the same resources we do. In these white and affluent neighborhoods, especially, you know, the one I live in, are all the money that goes into these things. Like, you know, people would complain about not having a turf field, and they're like, oh, why do they have a turf field? And it was hard to hear that because I was aware of that at the time, and they kind of don't understand why there's such a disparity and why things the way they are. But with that said, I think something is just, you know, these people in my town are not used to being friends or seeing people of color. It's such a bubble. So just that basic exposure, interacting with people, maybe make some new friends, interacting with people that are different from you, come from a different socioeconomic background, come from a different culture, is really important. And I think it could also just break down a lot of those stereotypes that they might have had in their head and preconceived notions of those people, of people in those towns that are near us. Because I remember, I'll never forget this. I was like a freshman, and we went to Middletown, and we got on the field, and one of the girls was like, "Taina, you belong here." And everyone else, they didn't really speak up, but I knew they could tell that they were like, they didn't even laugh. They were just like, probably shouldn't have said that. And I didn't know what to say either. I was really upset after that, and I didn't know why she was singling me out. And it was in such a degrading way too, because before that she was going on and on about, you know, like how it's ghetto here and this and that. So it was really hurtful and came from a lot of ignorance. I know I experience these things, so I have a preconceived notion. I'm already aware of these things inherently. But it was a little frustrating. I mean, it was more than ignorance. But yeah, so to conclude, I'm going to jump everywhere, so I'm going to cut it off. But yeah, I think something that we can definitely do is having those get-togethers like that. I would love that, and I'd love to see it. And just giving exposure to different cultures and different socioeconomic backgrounds will break down the stereotypes and break down that ignorance that people have as well, because they're just not around it. They're not aware enough, so especially for young kids.
I wholeheartedly agree with you about the like I call it like an exchange program for your teams. But that's something I know as an administrator I was looking to do for 2021. I don't know how much of a season we'll have still. It's still up in the air, which is unfortunate. But that's something as administrator I was going to encourage my college teams to do, is just work as the go-between and have them, you know, if they're coming to town to play one of our universities, we have 3 universities or actually 4 in the county, go to like Shay's old high school. It's downtown, and say, hey, you know, be the intermediate. Can you guys reserve the field? It's not really, we're not doing a fundraiser, so to speak, but we just want to play this game there, and have the college teams come earlier and just throw around with the kids and just interact with the players, and the players stay and watch, and they can have a pizza party or do whatever they want to do and watch and do things like that. I think it's a step in the right direction, and it's not super costly, because that's another thing, you know, we've got to worry about the program's cost to the program reaching out. So Arielle, I'm just glad I was on gallery view and we all got to see your reactions, because they were good.
Sorry.
No, don't be sorry. This is what it's all about. Everybody's in their lane, and there's nothing wrong with it. We're all going in the same direction. So the floor is yours.
Okay. So in a large frame, I think what we can do as a lacrosse community, players, coaches, others, fans, whatever. I think it's really important to stop being complacent. I hear a lot of, you know, applauding the forward movement. And I've said time and time again, progress is progress. I know things like this do not happen overnight. It is a process. But like, you know, we can't, these things should be happening, and truthfully, they're long overdue. So when we see this progress and we're looking back and we're like, wow, this is great. This is like the second Black person I've seen on the cover of US Lacrosse in months. That's great. But you know, there is not just 2 Black lacrosse players. So it's just, there is always more that you can do. Like, the work is never done, and that goes for social justice. And here in the lacrosse community, the work is truly never done. Like, there is always more that you can do as a coach, as a player. Also, something you could always keep in mind is you need to learn to start being comfortable being uncomfortable. The conversations are not easy to start, and once they are started, they are not easy to continue or keep alive, for that matter. So if you are going to be effective in positive change, you need to learn that it's going to be awkward and there are going to be road bumps, but it is truly your responsibility. I had said earlier, unfortunately, Black kids in this country do not have the luxury of just being kids. You are carrying a responsibility at a young age, and when you play this sport, you learn early on, especially when you play this sport and you start talking like we're talking and like how I've been talking. People are now looking at you, and maybe you didn't ask for the assume that responsibility and on, because like I said, the work is never done. So now I'm just gonna talk on like players, essentially, like Emma said and like Shay said, donating your old sticks, just being a positive role model, reaching out when and where you can. There are communities, no matter where you live, there are communities that need help, that need college players, that need Black players, that need white players, just players that know what they're talking about. Because, living in New York and being in the boroughs, you'll notice like there's no way people could truly think that Black people can't play this sport. Like, I don't understand it. Black people, like, if we're gonna be honest, like, dominate most professional sports. So I don't understand how in any aspect anyone could think that this sport that we couldn't do this. It's about the lack of resources, and I'm not just talking about fields and sticks, and I'm talking about coaches and people who are willing to teach people this game. Like, I got so many friends that just have never heard of this, and they're just like, well, I would have dominated this, like, you know. And it's unfortunate because it's like they missed that shot. So getting out there and just being a good role model. Coaches, like Emma said, coaches are in such a position of power, and I think that they just don't use it. As far as making sure that these things are discussed, but also the lack of players of color at the collegiate level is something that is totally measurable by recruiting. And I think Shay mentioned it. Like, you can be intentional about your recruiting, and I don't know why more coaches aren't. And then you'll hear coaches say that, like, you know, I just don't have players of color on my team because I don't see them. Well, because you're not looking in the right places. There, you know where they are, and that's not where you're looking for players. So it is about being intentional. I will say, for the sake of, you know, phrasing, intentional recruiting. And then I'll just close out with being intentional about all of your actions, being intentional about the way that you speak, intentional about the way that you act and carry yourself. You know, players of color, like I said, don't really have the luxury of being super careless. So being intentional about your actions, what you say to people, how people receive you. And as white players, you have a platform, and not only should you be intentional about what you're saying, you should be intentional about who and what voices you are amplifying. So especially during these times, I think it's very important for white people to understand that, you know, while I'm sure you have some very insightful things to say, amplify the voices of your Black teammates and let them be heard. Because I could say something a million times and no one could hear it. And 10 people that look just like me could say the same thing, but one white man says it and it is well received. So it is the job of that person who is in the position of power to tell the audience, listen to these people, because they have been saying it for a long, long time. So yeah, be intentional. That's it.
I like it. Very true. It's all true. You've all done a really good job. We're going to wrap it up. I just want to say I appreciate you taking the time. I know that this is can be a difficult conversation. Many of you mentioned that these things need to go on, and that's so true. And if you can take it back to your immediate 2 or 3 friends, and they can tell 2 friends, and they can tell 2 friends, you know, it's like that commercial, and so on and so on and so on. It grows exponentially very quickly. So you as panelists, people that are watching, you know, if you have questions, you ask the question then, you know, and find a friend and ask a question and be honest about it. And then have these conversations, and, you know, you're hearing players tell leaders, players are speaking out to you saying, lead us. So find an ally, and if you have to partner with somebody, partner with them and let them help you facilitate the conversation. So again, I know Taina's got to get back to work. She's standing in like the dang broom closet over there. That's dedication right there. I appreciate it. The rest of you, Shay's got to go back to work. I got to have dinner. I don't know what you other folks are doing, nor do I care. Enjoy your Sundays over there. I appreciate you taking the time. Emma, Shay, Taina, Arielle, Malcolm, Liz, who had to sign off earlier. And for everybody watching, thank you. This episode of Overtime was, you heard from the players and their perspective. And I'm sure any and all of them are welcome back anytime they want to talk and bring on some friends, and we'll do this as long as it's necessary. So thank you for your time, everybody. Thank you. You can all say goodbye at the same time if you like.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll be back next week with another episode of Overtime. Post a question to the panel by emailing us at ot@emwf.org. We'd love to hear from you.